Shattered is an indie thriller with Frank Grillo and John Malkovich, and it's actually pretty good. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about Shattered, a new indie thriller coming to theaters and on demand on January 14, 2022, and Blu-ray and DVD on February 22nd, 2022. It's an indie thriller that has, the headline stars of Frank Grillo and John Malkovich, but actually Cameron Monaghan and Lilly Krug kind of do the bulk of the acting here, and they're actually a pretty entertaining pair to watch. The movie is a thriller, so there's a lot of kind of suspense and horror elements in it. And overall, it's just kind of an enjoyable indie film. It's not perfect. It has some flaws. My hot take is I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I still think it's kind of a rental, but it does kind of do indie right. It has a good setting for an indie film. It kind of limits itself to this beautiful house. It has great characters and kind of an interesting story, although there are a few flaws in the story, and I'm going to go into those in a second. So I'm going to talk to you a little about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and then go into the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in that there, and I definitely have to go into some spoilers because some of the things I didn't like are related to the plot. So if you don't want to know anything about the film, and you probably don't because it's a thriller, you want to kind of be surprised when stuff happens, turn this off now. Don't end up watching this, and then go watch the film and come back and get my thoughts after. If you want to know more about the film, you want to hear more about the story, then let's keep going. So in Shattered, you have Chris, played by Cameron Monaghan, who is a retired kind of reclusive tech genius. He started a company. He started a couple companies, and eventually he hit on the security firm or security technology company and the movie was bought by Google. And so he kind of retired at a very young age and is now living in his beautiful kind of mountain house, very alone. The work affected his family life, so him and his wife are separated. His wife has their daughter. They are still cordial. They're trying to, I guess, make it work, but they are very distant, and they are kind of in the final days of a divorce. And so Chris is kind of feeling lonely. He's feeling isolated, and in this time he meets Skye, who's played by Lilly Krug, and she kind of randomly pops into his life, and they develop a very quick attraction and a very whirlwind romance. But so some things happen that start to give Chris pause, and he starts to suspect something is up with Skye. And then eventually he finds out something is up with Skye. So things I liked about this movie. So the first thing I really liked are the main characters. I really liked Chris and I really liked Skye. I liked Chris because you didn't really know much about him. He was kind of this reclusive, rich genius, and so I just kind of wanted to know more about him. I liked this kind of character who had retired young. He had this beautiful house, and you didn't really know much about what was going on, and you kind of got hints throughout. And I thought Cameron Monaghan did a good job of kind of staying guarded, not giving away too much at the start, and really kind of making you intrigued by what was going on with him. And I also really liked Lilly Krug as Skye. I thought Skye was a fun character as well. She was a little bit more fun and outgoing, and a nice foil to Chris, especially at the start when he's a little bit more reserved, and she kind of is more fun and gets him to open up a little bit. And I also really liked how Skye's character kind of played everyone around her. Like, she was definitely a manipulative character, and you could see how she was interacting with everyone, that she really wanted to be in control in pretty much every situation. And I thought Lilly Krug did a good job of balancing all those relationships that were happening, especially at the start of the movie. The second thing I really loved is the setting. It's this beautiful kind of isolated house up in the mountains. It looks like something that you would want to live in, but it's also so quiet and isolated that it works perfectly for this film specifically. It becomes, spoilers, more of like a life takeover movie, and the fact that this house is so isolated and away from everyone kind of really contributes to the setting, and also it lets the film be kind of confined, right? It's an indie film, so you want to make sure that there's not too many different places because that becomes expensive. But the fact that this house was so interesting and enjoyable to be in, you didn't really care that you spent a good amount of time in this location. And the third thing I really liked is kind of the mystery. There was a lot of mystery, especially at the start. You didn't know much about Chris. You kind of got hints as the movie progressed. You got a few hints about his life situation and his past. And then same with Skye. Skye was a mysterious character as well. There was a lot of unknown at the start, and it really made you kind of grasp on and want to learn more about these characters. I think that kind of hooked me at the start and kind of then pulled me through the ride. And I didn't love the second part of the movie as much as the first, but because I was so invested in the characters at that point, I still enjoyed the overall experience. So things I didn't love. The first is some of the writing and some of the delivery. Some of the lines were a little corny, and the delivery was not the most natural. It was a little distracting. Now it wasn't that bad. It wasn't too distracting, but it did distract me a little bit, and so it kind of made some of the emotional scenes not as emotional as they could be because the delivery was a little off. The second thing I didn't really love is the first turn, and this is the first turn when Sky turns on Chris and kind of captures him and starts to take over his life. And I thought that this was done a little bit too quickly. Now, it wasn't that bad, but I would have liked them to establish a few more events that kind of drew Chris's suspicions. There were like one or two, and then it was like, bam, Sky switched. She, admitted to doing something and then kind of took over his life. I just wish there were a few more incidents in the buildup. It felt like a pretty quick turn from everything is great to he is now a captive. And the last thing I didn't love is the kind of the last shooting turn, and that's part of the ending. So I'm going to get into the ending now. I'll kind of highlight that turn when I get to that part in the ending. But you kind of need to know more about what happens in the film to, I guess get a flavor for why I didn't like that turn. So, like I said, this film becomes kind of a takeover type film, like a life takeover, I guess like a Fatal Attraction kind of film. Early in the movie, Chris goes to visit where Sky lived. He figured out where she lived and he went to visit her. And there he finds that Sky's roommate has killed herself. And so Chris, this kind of, wears on Chris, as you would imagine, someone who's living in your house. At this point, Sky is living in his house. She's taking care of him. Someone that was close to Sky that killed herself. You'd think that that would shake Chris. And he goes to Sky and he's like, you didn't go to the police. You didn't mention this. She's like, why would I? And he says, well, if she was your roommate, like, maybe I might have questions. Like, well, and Sky basically says, like, well, I killed her. I don't want to go to the police. Then you find out that Sky was only using her because of the access and the view that roommate had to Chris. And she'd been studying Chris for a while, using a telescope to figure out his movements and what he did to kind of chronicle his life. Okay, then use that to build up this chance encounter. I thought the chance encounter was actually a pretty good way to do it. Like, it felt fun. It felt like this was a new relationship. It felt like Chris was helping her out. So I thought that whole aspect was very well done. But she had engineered this by observing his movements, realizing that he went to the grocery store at like midnight normally. And so she kind of ended up there. And then Sky kind of goes all in, and she like takes his phone and starts to torture him for his information. The first thing she does is she like drills into his leg. And this was quite a turn, but she needs the information, and she starts to drain his assets. She first drains his bank account, then she starts to go for other things in his house. There's a fence that she's working with, who we saw earlier. He injured Chris, which then caused Chris to ask Sky to move in to like help him recover. And that was kind of the impetus for Sky to then be able to start taking over the life, because then she was able to control his medication and also grab his phone when he was sleeping and things like that to start to slowly change his passwords and whatnot. That fence comes and like takes a look at the house, starts to try to empty the house as well. Like, she wants to take everything from Chris. So eventually John Malkovich, who plays like the landlord for Sky and her roommate who is dead, is exploring, kind of cleaning out the roommate's room, and sees a telescope and starts using the telescope to look up at the rich houses on the hill. And eventually he sees Sky up there and realizes that Sky is alive and that she has kind of taken over this house. This makes John Malkovich go up to that house and try to go in to either get some money or maybe like extort Sky. And so when he's there, Chris bribes him to untie him, and that lets Chris escape while John Malkovich has an encounter with Sky, and eventually a fatal encounter. But during this time, Chris is able to get to the garage, get out. He rides some sort of small vehicle that he's able to then get out and go down the hill and try to escape from Sky. He eventually runs into Frank Grillo, who is driving along, and he's like pleads with him, like, help, like, she's kidnapped me, she's taking over my life, like, she's not letting me leave. And Frank Grillo, in true Frank Grillo fashion, he's a master at this, is this kind of tough guy who's like helping. He like helps him. He's like, all right, come on, don't worry, boss, I got you. He's like this cool, supportive guy. He gets him in the car. They start driving, and you realize pretty early on that he's driving up the hill. Like, he was driving up the hill to start, and he's still driving up the hill. And eventually he pulls into Chris's house. And, this understandably makes Chris upset. And that's when, Frank Grillo punches Chris in the face. and you realize that Frank Grillo is working with Sky. So you find out that Frank is kind of the one that trained Sky in deception and in kind of identity theft, and he is the one that has groomed her to be this perfect kind of, I don't know, sleeper agent, whatever you want to call it, like this perfect person to get into people's lives and take over and drain them of their assets. So they are trying to get Chris to tell them about some bonds that are at his bank, and they eventually get Chris to, or they eventually take Chris's thumb so that they can use it to get into the vault, or I guess to get past identification, to get into the vault where some bonds are stored. But during this time, after they take his thumb and kind of are ready to go, Chris's wife and daughter show up. And that is not a great scene, because then they get kidnapped and they get thrown into the closet with Chris, and are held there. You don't know what's going to happen to them. Presumably, they're probably going to start getting tortured as well. But they just get thrown in there. Sky and Frank Grillo go to the bank to try to get the bonds. And this was kind of a weird scene, because so Frank, it was clever because Frank had like his arm in a cast and put the thumb like through the cast so that you could use Chris's thumb without like it looking weird. But I was a little unclear on how this would work, because it doesn't seem like they actually asked for ID other than the thumbprint. And I would think a bank would at least ask for, I don't know, some form of ID. Maybe they figure you can't really fake a thumb, but apparently you can in this movie. I would have expected something, something on file, like at least a photo ID to make sure that this was actually Chris trying to get access to these accounts, or at least check Sky's ID to make sure that that was his wife. Yeah, in the movie they just rely on the thumb, which I thought was like, it was a clever device, like, to show how they were able to get around it. But it did feel a little strange that the bank that was holding presumably hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars in bonds, would just like not check your ID before letting you in. Anyways, while they're driving, Chris and his wife and his daughter are stuck in this closet, this locked closet, and they eventually realize that his daughter can fit through this vent, and so they get his daughter up there to try to get out and unlock the house. And one of the things that they say is like, do you remember the code? And his daughter remembers the code. I was a little thrown off by these scenes because I think Sky was not really able to. Sky took over the house, which I think means that the codes would have changed. She should have at least changed the codes to the security system, to all the access, so that Chris wouldn't be able to escape. So the fact that the code wasn't changed to the door, that felt a little weird. But then also, Chris is like a security expert. He started a security company. You would think he would have some fail safes or some sort of second level authorizations, something that would allow him to regain control of his house. Now, it wouldn't be a very interesting film if he was like able to just get right back in control. But I thought that was kind of weird. They could have made it, they should have made his background maybe something else that would have maybe made it a little more understandable that he didn't double arm his security system. Anyways, so Willow gets out. She goes down the vent. And during this time, you find out that Chris's wife, they've been going through a divorce. Chris's wife took the bonds and moved them to a different box as like leverage, essentially saying this was her failsafe in case their divorce didn't go amicably. On the advice of her lawyer, she took those bonds and put them somewhere else. So when Frank and Sky finally get into the vault, into this box, they see a note saying like, on advice of my counsel, blah blah blah, I've moved these bonds, and it's signed by his wife. So now they're a little they're obviously angry, and they're speeding back because now they're gonna have to get the information from Chris's wife. And Chris knows this as well, so that this puts like an extra amount of tension on here, because they have to get out, because now Chris's wife and potentially his daughter are in trouble, because they clearly will do anything to get to drain Chris of all of his assets, and that probably includes torturing his wife and daughter. So to get back, you kind of see Willow going through the vent as they're driving up. You're not sure she's gonna be able to get there, but they get back, and as they're going through the house looking for Chris and his wife and Willow, they go to the closet, see that they're gone. They start going through trying to find them, and that's when Chris pops out and starts to he cuts Frank Grillo. They fight, and eventually, Chris is on the ground, and Sky has a gun pointed to him, and Frank Grillo is saying like, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. And Sky, turns to Chris, and Sky turns to Frank and shoots him, which this was the turn I didn't love, because it didn't feel it felt a little bit too convenient. I think what the idea was, either she didn't like this life and Frank Grillo was like forcing her to do this, but she seemed to enjoy aspects of draining Chris's account and all of that. So I didn't get the fact that she was kind of like forced to do this, especially at, like, maybe at the start when she was seducing him, she would have been like happy and bubbly to make sure. But after the turn, like if she didn't like this, she didn't have to put up pretenses, and she seemed to enjoy it. They try to preview this aspect a little bit, because when Frank and Sky are driving to the bank to drain the account, Frank turns to Sky and says, like, you seem different on this one. Are you okay? Which I think either means that she likes Chris, or at least maybe she doesn't want to keep doing this, and so she's going to betray Frank Grillo's character. But it felt like a pretty quick turn and a pretty dramatic change for her, especially with some of the stuff they'd already done. If she was going to try to get out, I think that she would have either treated Chris nicer, especially when he's trying to get information, like treated him a little nicer, or been a little bit more genuine with him. She was pretty mean to him when it was just her, and then when Frank Grillo was there, they were very mean to him. Or I figure she would have shown a little bit more resentment towards Frank Grillo if she was going to turn on him. So I felt like this kind of came out of nowhere. It did make for a convenient change, and I think it did make for a very convenient plot twist, but it felt strange. Like she shoots Frank Grillo, and then Chris attacks her, and he like hits her with like a mountain climbing pickaxe, like a snow axe or a snow pick, and hits her in the shoulder, and he starts running away. He then uses the security system to kind of distract Sky, because Sky still has the gun, and so he uses it to like turn on lights and close doors and things like that to distract her and cause her to start using up her ammo. She starts shooting at strange noises that she hears around her. Eventually, he tackles her, tries to like get the gun away. I think the gun goes away, and they start to fight. And she's using like a blade on him, and her shoulder is really messed up from that, I assume from that pickaxe, but she's pretty fine. Another little inconsistency, but whatever. It wasn't that big of a deal. So Sky is fighting Chris, and eventually Chris's wife comes in and helps as well. And so they're both trying to fight Sky. They're both trying to stop her, but Sky eventually wins. Like she's done this before, and she is pretty scruffy, and so she eventually gets them both on the ground, and she's about to take them out with the like snow pick, the snow axe, whatever you want to call it. And then boom, you hear a gunshot, and Sky falls over, and you see Willow, Chris's daughter, holding the gun. And so now Sky is kind of neutralized. She's on the ground. She's kind of bleeding out. And before she dies, she turns to Chris and she says, "Chris, my real name is Margaret." In what would have been a pretty touching scene if they would have established it a little better, I think. Like, I think this was all part of this idea that maybe she liked Chris and she didn't want to do this anymore. But it does feel like if that was the case, if that's what she was trying to do, she wouldn't have done some of the things she did to Chris in order to get to this point. She seemed to really enjoy it, especially when it was just her. So I thought that it was a really nice scene, but it didn't feel earned given what we'd already learned. Now, maybe she just wanted to say her name to someone because she had been Sky for so long and just wanted to like tell someone before she died like who she actually was. Maybe that was the point of it. But I thought it was kind of this pattern of them trying to say that this job was different. Like she actually liked Chris, but then her actions didn't really justify that kind of a conclusion. So again, not that big of a deal. I still really enjoyed the film. I thought it was a good movie, but some of these little inconsistencies make this more of a rental to me than like a must watch. But either way, you'll probably enjoy it. It's pretty entertaining, and it's a good indie thriller that will kind of hook you early and keep you going because it gets so crazy towards the end. So that is Shattered. Like I said, it's available in theaters and on demand on January 14, 2022, and on Blu-ray and DVD on February 22nd, 2022. And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And please check out my other content. I've got other movie reviews, interviews, unboxing videos, and movie recommendations. Thank you.